Committee hearings, no amendments, and just 10 hours of debate for the minority.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected to release a discussion draft tomorrow, but even some Republicans worried about the secrecy. New York Congressman Peter King voicing his concerns on the radio.
It looks like they're trying to hide something. If this was too secretive, it's going to put a cloud over the whole final product.
Health Secretary Tom Price led another health care listening session at the White House today, this one with people from rural America at risk of losing coverage. It was clear that there are still a lot of blanks left to fill in.
They didn't offer any plans. They didn't offer any inside advice about what's going to happen in the future. But I did feel like we had at least people who were listening, and that goes a long way with me.
Sources tell Fox News that one reason for all the secrecy is that the Senate bill is expected to be substantially different than the one that passed the House, a bill the president recently referred to as, quote, mean. Senate Republicans are trying to avoid a shouting match with House conservatives until they at least get the framework of a bill in place. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. Democrats were supposed to be able to take advantage of a new president they consider unpopular, overmatched, and under siege. But it has not worked out that way. Correspondent Ellison Barber tonight on Democrats seemingly lost in the political wilderness. Good evening, Ellison.
Good evening, Brett. So some Democrats say this is actually a bit of a win for their side because they got close in districts that lean red.
We're not crying in our soup. We are actually encouraged in many ways.
In all of these special elections thus far, we've seen dramatic shifts in the percentage of losses we've taken in the past has really turned around dramatically. 5
special elections happened this year. 4 were discussed as potentially competitive. Republicans won all of those.
All the 4 Republican-held House special elections so far is that in 3 of the 4, in districts where Trump did a lot better than Georgia's 6, the Democrats did way better than Hillary Clinton did, but they didn't win any of them.
They have to seriously reassess their leadership team. They have had essentially the same leadership team since they took over the House of Representatives in 2006. Yeah, they won in 2006, but subsequently would not only lose the House, but fail in 3 successive attempts to try to retake it. Nancy Pelosi has to be asking herself the question, how long is it appropriate to remain at the helm as the top Democrat in the country when they are not able to execute and turn around even winnable races?
Good evening, everybody.
When the results came down in Georgia, a somewhat somber Jon Ossoff took the stage.
At a time when politics has been dominated by fear and hatred and scapegoating and division, this community stood up.
Whatever they did, didn't work. Almost as soon as the results came down, Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton tweeted, Ossoff race better be a wake-up call for Democrats. Business as usual isn't working. Time to stop rehashing 2016 and talk about the future. On that, Representative Sherry Bustos agreed.
I don't think a strategy to be successful is to fight with Donald Trump every single day. There are a lot of sideshows that are going on all the time in Washington, D.C. And when I go home and I walk the aisles of the grocery store and I'm hearing from moms and grandmas and dads and kids in college, they don't want us to be in fights all the time. They say, you know, make things happen, bring home results.
As a whole, from the governor's mansion to state offices to Congress, Democrats are at some of their lowest levels in years. In state legislatures, Republicans hold a little less than 4,200 seats. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, they haven't had that many since the 1920s.
Something to watch. Ellison, thank you. The media has been prepared all year to use Democratic special election victories to reinforce a narrative of a failing President Trump. Instead, they have had to adjust to a very different electoral reality. And that adjustment has been interesting to watch and read at times. Here's Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howie Kurtz.
The media narrative heading into 4 House special elections was clear. The Democrats could capitalize on President Trump's difficulties beginning in April with Kansas.
Democrats are hoping to turn their grassroots opposition to Trump into wins at the ballot boxes in some special elections coming up in Georgia, Kansas, and Montana. But
The National Republican Congressional Committee seems a bit spooked, and Kansas is not the only red state where Republicans are sweating.
After the GOP won the Kansas seat, the media said Montana Republican Greg Gianforte was in trouble for body slamming a reporter.
Overnight, 3 local newspapers here rescinded their endorsements of Gianforte.
Gianforte won anyway, and the media drumbeat grew louder for yesterday's contest in South Carolina, and especially for Georgia Democrat Jon Ossoff, taking on Republican Karen Handel. The New York Times headline, high-stakes referendum on Trump takes shape in a Georgia special election.
So Democrats have been seeing this race as their best shot at a pickup. Republicans are absolutely desperate to keep that seat red.
President Trump woke up to this today. A new CBS News poll showing his job approval rating is down to 36%. He knows he will be blamed if Republicans lose.
Polling guru Nate Silver tweeted that there's a 70% chance Ossoff wins and a 30% chance that math is dead and data is broken. When Ossoff lost a much-hyped race, some liberal commentators quickly played down its significance.
The Republican wins in Georgia. It shouldn't be breaking news. This is the way it should happen.
They should have won this. The fact that it was even close and the fact that this much money had to be spent, I don't think any Republican is comfortable right now.
And within minutes, MSNBC switched back to other news. There was this telling prediction last night from Charles Krauthammer.
If the Democrat wins, the headlines are going to be in referendum on Trump, Democrats win. I can guarantee you. If he loses, the headlines will be in a race that doesn't mean anything. In a special election with special circumstances would turn out problematic, etc.
That's not entirely true. Some pundits today are describing the Georgia outcome as a demoralizing setback for the Democrats. But it was the nonstop coverage and perhaps some wishful thinking that made it seem this ruby red district might turn blue. Brett?
Howie, thank you. One of the major obstacles to the president's agenda has been the investigations into his campaign's alleged collusion with the Russians and now allegations of obstruction of justice. Today on Capitol Hill, 2 more hearings and new insight on what went down and when. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is on the Hill tonight with a recap. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. 3 months before the election, witnesses testified that Russian hackers probed databases across the country.
We have evidence of 21 states, or election-related systems in 21 states that were targeted.
But in no case were actual vote tallies altered in any way, shape, or form.
That is correct.
Voter registration data was stolen from Illinois and Arizona to help the Russians understand what it consisted of and how it might be manipulated
to possibly impacting future elections and or targeting of particular individuals.
What are the dangers of manipulation of voter registration databases?
If voters are removed from the registration database and then they show up on election day, that's going to cause problems.
They wanted these stories to be out there, that someone had pinged into these systems, creating the specter of being able to argue at some point that the election was invalid.
The other 19 affected states are not publicly known.
I have no interest in trying to embarrass any state. But you know, if this, because we've seen this for too long in cyber, where people simply try to sweep this under the rug and assume to go along the way.
And frustration at a House panel where the former Homeland Security Secretary was pressed on the Obama administration's response.
Why didn't the President of the United States say a foreign power is interfering in our affairs?
We were very concerned that we not be perceived as taking sides in the election.
More than 6 months after the federal election, frustration still lingers at the state and local level.
The former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson repeatedly told my colleagues and I that no specific or credible threats existed in the fall of 16. It is unclear why our intelligence agencies would withhold timely and specific threat information from election officials.
And witness after witness warned 2016 is only the beginning.
This is of the utmost urgency for the department and this government to ensure that we have better protections going forward.
The public debate comes on the same day Special Counsel Robert Mueller met with senior senators behind closed doors to ensure their separate probes do not conflict.
Mueller did not take reporters' questions today. In a statement, the Senate Judiciary Committee leadership called their meeting productive, adding both parties have committed to an ongoing dialogue. Brett.
Catherine Harris. Iraq's defense ministry says ISIS terrorists have destroyed the structure known as Mosul's Great Mosque. The ministry says terrorists detonated explosives inside the Al-Nouri Mosque and its iconic-leaning minaret. ISIS claims a U.S. airstrike destroyed those structures. ISIS fighters initially tried to take down the minaret 3 years ago, but Mosul residents formed a human chain to protect it. The mosque is on the southern edge of the old city, the last ISIS stronghold in Mosul. The U.S. is putting new pressure on China tonight to push North Korea to change. This comes just a day after President Trump appeared to throw in the towel on China's efforts to rein in the unpredictable Kim Jong-un. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen reports tonight from the State Department.
Following the first session of a new ministerial-level dialogue with China established by the Trump administration, held mostly behind closed doors, Secretary of State Tillerson termed North Korea the top security threat to the United States and said he told this to his Chinese visitors.
They have a diplomatic responsibility to exert much greater economic and diplomatic pressure on the regime if they want to prevent further escalation in the region.
The session followed the death this week of Otto Warmbier, the young Ohio native held hostage by China's client state, North Korea, and returned to U.S. soil last week in an unresponsive state.
This goes beyond any kind of understanding of law and order, of humanity.
It's a total disgrace what happened to Otto.
President Trump, visibly moved by the case, tweeted out Tuesday that the American effort to enlist China to rein in the North's behavior, quote, has not worked out, adding, at least I know China tried.
We have to read this in connection with his April 11th tweet, in which he said, if China can't solve North Korea, the United States will do so alone. Now, if he still believes that, it means that there is going to be American action on North Korea, and presumably that would be soon.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry defended Beijing's service as a mediator and pledged to redouble its efforts. Even Arizona Senator John McCain, who rushed to proclaim Warmbier's death a murder by the regime of Kim Jong-un, urged a, quote, calibrated response by President Trump.
Within rocket range of the DMZ, the boundary between North and South Korea, is a whole bunch of rockets that could hit a city of 26 million people, i.e. Seoul.
Secretary Tillerson said the 3 Americans still detained in North Korea are being held there unlawfully. But one of his top aides told reporters ahead of this summit in a background conference call that the State Department doesn't regard those 3 Americans as, quote, the pivotal issue here. Brett?
James Rosen, live at the State Department. James, thank you. Presidential son-in-law and chief Middle East advisor Jared Kushner is in the volatile region today to try to jumpstart peace talks there. Kushner met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and others in Jerusalem. He then attended a late-night session with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank city of Ramallah. President Trump has tasked Kushner with this ambitious goal of laying the groundwork for what he calls the ultimate deal. There is a new future king in Saudi Arabia. A major shakeup in the line of succession there has allies such as the U.S. wondering what other changes may be in store for the oil-rich kingdom. Correspondent Connor Powell has the story from our Middle East newsroom.
Saudi Arabia's ailing King Salman shook up his country last night and sent shockwaves through the Middle East when he reversed decades of tradition and appointed his son, Mohammed bin Salman, as crown prince. State TV showed the former heir to the throne, Mohammed bin Nayef, pledging his loyalty to the future king, suggesting the transition, at least publicly, should be smooth. But behind the scenes, the less experienced 31-year-old crown prince has stoked internal divisions among Saudi's ruling family, and as defense minister, launched the conservative Sunni Arab nation down several controversial paths. Bin Salman is the chief architect of Saudi Arabia's disastrous war in Yemen and instigated the move to diplomatically isolate the oil-rich nation of Qatar. He has supported a diplomatic warming with Israel and is also a hawk on Iran, and like President Donald Trump, opposes dialogue with Saudi Arabia's Shiite neighbor.
Mohammed bin Salman is somebody who has cultivated the American Trump administration very intensely and personally with visits there. The Americans seem to like what he's proposing.
President Trump called to congratulate the Crown Prince today, and the White House said the 2 leaders discussed the, quote, priority of cutting off all support for terrorists and extremists. But Saudi Arabia has long had ties with extremists. 15 of the 19 hijackers on September 11th hailed from the conservative Muslim nation. Still, on the heels of President Trump's visit to Riyadh last month, it is clear the White House has embraced Saudi Arabia's claim of leader of the Arab world and is going all in with the young crown prince. In a sign of what a seismic shift in the region this announcement was, the appointment of a new Saudi crown prince was publicly welcomed by Israel's communication minister. Brett?
Connor Powell in our Middle East newsroom. Connor, thank you. Back here in the U.S., stocks were mixed today. The Dow lost 57. The S&P 500 was down 1. The Nasdaq gained 46. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has declared a state of emergency. He says it's a response to the flash flooding and severe weather caused by Tropical Storm Cindy. We'll continue to update you on this system as it moves along with millions of residents in various states in its path. The heat is on tonight in the Southwest. National correspondent William Lajeunesse is in Phoenix, where residents are experiencing the worst heat wave in years.
The Valley of the Sun living up to its name on the first day of summer.
It's really important, especially as how hot it is here in Arizona, that people continue to drink water and stay hydrated.
A crippling heat wave driving residents, animals, even air conditioners to the breaking point.
Now people are like desperate. They'll do and pay anything for these units to get them fixed.
Record highs across the Southwest. Las Vegas 117, Phoenix 119, Palm Springs 121, putting first responders like the Border Patrol on high alert.
It's physically impossible for those individuals to carry enough water.
Utilities warned of blackouts. Aid workers checked on the vulnerable. Crews battled wildfires in Utah and California. In Arizona, it was literally too hot to fly.
The plane literally cannot take off. If that's the legitimate reason, then of course we don't want to be on it.
American Airlines canceled 45 flights Tuesday, specifically the small jets that can't take off in the hot, thin air. Bigger jets, rated above 118 degrees, were unaffected.
Each make and model aircraft have performance criteria, and if any variable exceeds that, it essentially grounds the airplane.
And while you can fry an egg and melt crayons in this heat, officials say the biggest concern is health.
We're looking for people who may be still out in the sun or unable to find a place to get cool.
Last year, 130 Arizonans died in heat-related fatalities, in about half the cases because victims lacked air conditioning.
It's usually right at 110 is when all the units usually start failing if they're on their last leg.
And doctors say that holds true for people as well as the body begins to overheat around 108. The current heat wave expected to break by Sunday when Phoenix returns to a normal 105. Brett?
Drink lots of water. William, thank you. You can add Missouri to the list of states suing the pharmaceutical industry over the deadly opioid epidemic. Correspondent Matt Finn is in our Midwest newsroom with what's led to the outbreak of lawsuits.
The scale of the epidemic we face is startling.
Missouri's Attorney General Josh Hawley filed a scathing new lawsuit against 3 popular drug manufacturers, arguing they committed fraud by lying to doctors and consumers about how addictive and deadly their prescription drugs can be.
Every parent disabled by drug abuse is a tragedy. Every child lost to this epidemic is irreplaceable.
Missouri named Purdue, Janssen, and Endo Pharmaceuticals in the lawsuit, one of the largest in state history. It says the companies helped create the worst drug abuse epidemic Missouri has ever seen, contributing to roughly 500 opioid deaths in 2015 alone.
It's something no parent should ever have to do, is bury their own child.
Jamie Fabick says her high school-aged daughter died from a hidden opioid addiction.
We never got to see her graduate from high school. We never got to see her graduate from college. He never got to walk her down the aisle. If this sounds like a nightmare, it has definitely been a nightmare for our family.
Fox News reached out to each drug company named in Missouri's lawsuit. In an email, Janssen responded, writing in part, "Janssen has acted appropriately, responsibly, and in the best interest of patients regarding our opioid pain medications." Missouri is not the first to take action. It joins a list of states, counties, and cities investigating or suing drug companies amid a nationwide epidemic of opioid abuse. New government data just released shows there were 1.3 million opioid-related ER visits in 2014 alone, a 99% increase compared to 2005. President Trump has repeatedly pledged to bolster federal efforts to combat the opioid crisis. The president and Republican congressional leaders have insisted their plan to repeal and replace Obamacare will not pull out the rug from Americans who rely on the law for their substance abuse treatment. Brett?
Matt, thank you. Catch our live 11 p.m. special report tonight after President Trump's Iowa speech. I'll have an exclusive interview with Missouri's Attorney General Josh Hawley, who has just filed this lawsuit, as you just saw. Up next, the panel. Democrats search for a message, and President Trump declares victory as 2 more Republican wins in special congressional elections come in. All of that next.
We all know the result of last night's elections, and we're all a bit disappointed here this morning. It's a tough day for Democrats and in the losses that we sustained.
They thought the elections last night were going to be a referendum on this president, and once again he proved never underestimate him, and that the American people put him and other Republicans in place for a reason.
People think that because someone or something is unpopular among the chattering class within Washington and New York, that somehow applies in Georgia or in South Carolina or in many places in Florida. And it's just not true. And that disconnect was brought to light in the presidential race in 2016, and I think it's been brought to light again last night.
The fallout from the special congressional elections last night continues. As you take a look at Georgia, the race board here, this is Karen Handel with a big win. Bigger than expected, actually, over John Ossoff, the Democrat. In South Carolina, a little tighter race than everybody thought, with Republican Ralph Norman winning, but not by as big a margin as once thought. The president tweeting out late last night, well, the special elections are over, and those that want to make America great again are 5-0. All the fake news, all the money equals 0. And this morning, Democrats would do much better as a party if they got together with Republicans on health care, tax cuts, security. Obstruction doesn't work. As we pointed out last night on the show, 4 congressional special elections wins for Republicans, the one in California. Javier Becerra, 2 Democrats running. Let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief for the Weekly Standard, editor-in-chief of LifeZette. Laura Ingram, Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics, co-founder and publisher, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Steve, fallout and implications.
Well, boy, the discussion of these races certainly fell off the radar today. I mean, this was going to be the kind of result that defined the politics in this country through the midterm elections and was going to presage a Democratic sweep. And somehow people aren't talking about it as much in the media as you might have thought. Look, I think this was clearly a good night for Donald Trump. He has every right to crow about it. I think Republicans would be wise not to take too much comfort in these results. These are specific races. In the Georgia race in particular, both candidates kind of ran with Donald Trump at arm's distance. And, you know, Marco Rubio's point about the chattering classes in D.C. not liking Donald Trump is, I think, short-sighted. His approval rating is still 36-37%, depending on the polls. That's not something that Republicans are going to want to take going into midterm elections. There's a lot that needs to happen between now and those midterms if Republicans are going to hold their majorities.
Well, one of the things I heard was that Nancy Pelosi, in some of these districts around the country, is less popular than President Trump. She just came out moments ago with a letter to Democratic colleagues. The House Minority Leader says, as we take inventory of the special election results, it is important to note that we made important progress in the 4 special elections this year. The House was in play before the Georgia race. The House remains in play now. There are 70 Republican-held seats, more competitive than Georgia's 6. The president's numbers are in the 30s, and our base is energized. We must now put forth our message. Every effort was made to win last night, but we don't agonize, we organize. Organize inside the House, mobilize outside for the good of the American people.
San Francisco doesn't sell in most of the country. I mean, I love San Francisco. It's a great place. But San Francisco values, Nancy Pelosi likes to talk about them a lot. You see, it seems like last night, even though the margin of victory, I think, could have been bigger for Karen Handel if she actually embraced Trump a little more. I have the counter-conventional wisdom going into this race. I think she should have campaigned with him. I think the margin would have been 5 points, not the 3 points. There's a resistance in the country, I think, to the resistance. I think people want to see points on the board. They want to see some legislation that makes their lives better. And Republicans need happy voters. Democrats need to have an agenda that actually connects with those kind of more middle-of-the-road, independent voters who turned away from Obama and Hillary last time and turned toward Donald Trump. I do not think that they have put forth that agenda. I think they're good at resisting and blocking and the Russia, 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 but I don't think Georgia cared about Russia much. I don't think South Carolina did. Certainly Montana didn't. So I think Republicans have challenges, disunity. But I think the Democrats still don't see why they really lost this election, last election cycle.
Tom, take a listen to Senator Murphy and Congressman Crowley.
The fact that we have spent so much time talking about Russia has been a distraction from what should be the clear contrast between Democrats and the Trump agenda, which is on economics.
As much as I think people in Washington tend to focus on the issues of Russia and the president and the Republicans' inability to get much of anything accomplished, we need to focus on the local issues. That's what gets Democrats elected.
Boy, Tom, that's a different message than we've been hearing from Democrats on the Hill.
It's starting to dawn on them that what's been going on in the Beltway has been totally disconnected from what's been going on in the district. But even beyond that, Democrats have this issue. You already have some Democrats saying, look, the reason that John Ossoff lost is because he wasn't strident enough. He wasn't progressive enough in that district. And that necessarily isn't the best lesson for Democrats to take away from this. The other part of this, too, is, look, you can carpetbag in Senate races, but you got to have someone from the district. And to have, 82% of your money coming in from Hollywood and New York and all these other places, that doesn't go over well with people in these local congressional districts, especially ones in the South.
That debate question, when Karen Handel turns and says, who are you going to vote for? And it's just silence from Ossoff because he couldn't vote. He didn't live in the district. Charles.
Yeah, they say he lived down the street. I think it was 3.5 miles, a very long street it turned out to be. Look, I think the key here is what was in Pelosi's message, ironically. She said, we have to get our message out. They don't have a message. This is the same reason that Hillary lost. The left among the Democrats has a message. Sanders has a message. Nationalize health care. Raise taxes, increase regulation, impose income inequality. That's a message. That's actually an ideology. It has some attraction, but it's a minority. That's not going to win for them. But the center of the Democratic Party, the old Clinton, center left that dominated the party in the 90s and succeeded, it's dead. It's mute. It has nothing to say. So having nothing to say, they have now fixated on Trump. It's all on the resistance, all about Trump. What they learned last night is that that is not enough. That isn't enough to energize people. I mean, think of the big picture. Why do they want to win the House? For one reason. Not tax reform, not jobs. They want to win it so they can start impeaching the president, undoing the election of 2016. That is the biggest mistake, political mistake in political strategy I have ever seen, and I think people understand that's not a worthy cause.
All right, you're talking about Democrats at this health care rally. They did have something to say. Just take a listen.
We have a very simple message. No hearing, no vote. No hearing, no vote.
Together, we are going to keep the pressure up here on Republicans to bring Trump care out of the shadows into the light.
The #1 priority from now until next week when we vote is to be loud.
We don't know what the bill looks like because it's been written by 13 male Republicans behind a closed door.
That's not true anymore. There were many different inputs to this health care bill that is informing, Steve. It is behind closed doors. We're expecting to see the Senate GOP version of something tomorrow. But as far as Democrats, they're still dealing with the issue of these insurance companies like Anthem pulling out of these different states. They're focused on, obviously, the transparency issue.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are lucky that they're not going to be judged on their ability to rally crowds at events like this, because they wouldn't do very well. Look, I think Republicans are in a tough spot on this. I mean, it isn't many of the same arguments that Republicans made as indictments of Obamacare and the process of Obamacare can be made today. Democrats are making those arguments. I think they're making them somewhat effectively. The bigger problem with Republicans is numbers. If you look at what's happening in the Senate, you've got conservatives, you've got who are asking for certain things. You've got moderates who are asking for other things. They can only lose 2 votes, and it doesn't appear right now, at least, that they're going to be able to do it.
At this moment, President Trump is arriving in Iowa. Air Force One has touched down, wheeling in there. Be a big campaign-style rally tonight. We expect to hear a lot about those special congressional elections. Maybe a little bit, Laura, about health care. What about this debate as we look live?
I think the president is smart to take this message on the road, getting back to economic renewal, tax cuts, tax reform probably won't be able to happen this year. But this is where he's really good. He's really good at rallying the people to his agenda. Make America great again. Let's clean up Washington. It's proving really difficult for him. There are swamp monsters in both the Republican and the Democrat Party that prefer to gobble him up. But he's putting up the good fight, and I think he has to rally the people in a way against Congress. It's a little risky, but I think that actually is a sweet spot for him. Look, he's I like these guys. They're good guys. But my goodness, they've had 7 years. They need to bring a piece of legislation to my desk that has enough votes so we can actually pass some legislation. I mean, Mitch McConnell has to know how many votes they have for something. And just at this point, they've got to pass that. I mean, it's ugly, but that's what he has to start doing.
Tom, what if President Trump isn't that much of an albatross to Republicans across the country? What if it's totally misread here in Washington as 2016 was?
Well, certainly the White House is hoping last night has some residual benefits for what's going on in Congress, that they've got some folks that'll put a little steel in their spine, particularly in the Senate, because it is a dicey situation. And Trump sort of amplified that on his own by calling the Republican bill mean, and reportedly in this meeting. I mean, that sort of shows you what the tension that's there. So Mitch McConnell, I think they are going to put it to a vote. I think that's one of the things they learned from last time is they're going to go for this thing, and they don't know whether they're going to have the votes, whether they're going to get 42 votes or 50 votes, but they are going to put senators' feet to the fire, and really it'll come down to the argument, do you want to be the senator who keeps Obamacare in place, and do you want to bear that burden? Because otherwise, that's what's going to happen.
Last word as we wait for the president to exit Air Force One, Charles.
We saw the problem with the Democrat strategy on health care when we just showed Ron Wyden saying that our purpose between now and then, our task, is to be loud. Loud is not a program. They're obsessed with the process, secrecy. Americans don't care one way or the other if this plan was hatched, in a winery or pulled out of a refrigerator. All they want is something that works. The president's problem is that he stepped on the message, and he's going to have to get the 51 in the Senate. I think it's doable, but as long as they talk about substance, not process, they're already ahead of the game.
We'll bring you the steps on the ground in Cedar Rapids. It may take some time there. We have an 11 p.m. live show tonight after the president's speech, and we'll be able to break down all of the fallout and the campaign style from this event. We'll bring you back there in Cedar Rapids after a break. Next up, the president's foreign policy challenges.